What's up, guys and gals? Welcome back to the channel. I'm John. If you're tuning in for the first time, thanks for stopping by. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below. We got a lot of things to cover today. We got a lot of things going on over at our other channel, Between the Rails. Make sure you go check out that podcast. We got the first 3 episodes up. You can find the full-length episodes and videos on either the channel or Spotify if you prefer to listen to long content that way. We got some things coming up with Jeremy Ferguson on there. You're not going to want to miss it. So we're going to poke the bear a little bit today. Everybody's got their thoughts and opinions. I'm no different. I'm going to share that with you guys. And so here comes the intro, and we're going to get to it. All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. We're going to get rocking and rolling here. Like I said, hit that like and subscribe button down below. If you like what you're seeing here, it helps us grow our channel. It goes a long ways. And remember, guys, join our Discord. It's free. If you want to support the channel through our Patreon, you can do that as well. You can find links below for those in the description. So a couple days ago, Jeremy Ferguson put out what I thought was a pretty impressive letter. It seemed pretty straightforward. You know, he's talking about everything that went down over the last several months, you know, negotiations with the NMB, going in front of the PEB board for PEB 250, and then negotiations leading up to the final countdown on the strike, why we didn't strike. I thought it was pretty honest. I thought it was pretty real and straight to the point. However, that didn't play into the narrative of 2 specific groups of people. One of that being primarily Frank Wilnor over at Railway Age, and the silly socialist over at the World Socialist website. And it's funny. I find it really funny because before Ferguson and had gone out there and actually given an official statement and a rundown of everything that has happened, Frank and the socialist have been broadcasting and blasting all these predictions and saying that Smart's doing this, Ferguson's doing that. You know, they're trying to undermine the workers, and nobody's even said anything yet out of that national office until this letter. And now Frank and these guys over there at the socialist website are backpedaling, and they're accusing Ferguson of massive hypocrisy when the hypocrisy actually lies with themselves. And you may be wondering kind of what I'm talking about. And I'm gonna show you that, because it's really funny, because they're claiming that, you know, before all this started, that Ferguson was going to try to sell this contract to the membership, that it was a sellout deal. They're claiming that there are sellouts with Congress, there are sellouts, you know, within their ranks, and it was all in conspiracy with the Democrats to make sure the Democrats, you know, look good for midterms. When if you take the time to actually read his letter, you see that that is not the case. And he calls out not just the Democrats, but everybody else involved. And why this tentative agreement is the PEB plus some extras. You know, he's never once said this is the best thing ever. I haven't seen that come out of his office. But if you listen to what's being said by Frank Wilnor and the guys over there at the socialist website, you would think it's a completely different thing. I mean, they're making wild accusations, everything from, voter fraud to backdoor deals and getting paid off by all the way up to the Biden administration. Like, you couldn't, I don't even know how they're able to twist these words to factually back up these things. And I'm almost pretty positive some of their quote unquote evidence is actually fabricated, because nothing's been shown to be factual and nothing has been proven, with hard evidence to support what they're claiming. And if you guys have been tuning in the channel, I'm all about facts versus fiction. If it's bullshit, I'm going to call it as bullshit. That's just what it is. And I've been saying since this whole thing started, since we got that PB 250 award, that the noose was put around our neck right then and there. The PB obviously did not meet our expectations, and it was very, very far from what we deserve. Plain and simple. But it's unfortunately, I hate to say it, it was the bullet in the shotgun, because now everything is based around that PB, because plain and simple, the carriers refused to negotiate. They refused to negotiate on a new contract. They refused to negotiate because, and modify the PB 250 on the gross wages and all the other points. They didn't address RISA. They kicked that to arbitration. And so the carriers refused to come off any of it, because they're literally throwing a wall-eyed fit because they didn't get one-man crews, which they wanted to take to arbitration within 6 months to get the conductors off the train, which is funny. Railway Age is not talking about that. The socialists aren't even talking about crew consists. They're more worried about their power play and all this and trying to insert themselves into this whole fiasco to make themselves relevant again in the socialist, in the socialist scheme of things. And so they're scrambling to play on anybody's thing that they can. You got this guy, Will Lehman, that's trying to run for a UAW president spot. This guy doesn't even have a clue about anything railroad. He's not from the craft. And the stuff he's saying in back channels, he's trying to get railroaders to organize a wildcat strike in back channels. And when people say, well, that's illegal, he's basically saying, who cares if it's illegal? They can't fire us all. Yeah, they can. They will. And just so you guys know, if you do wildcat strike and you show up on property, you're probably going to get arrested by the local authorities right then and there. And he thinks that that can't happen. He's trying to get railroaders to enforce his bullshit resolution on their fellow brothers and sisters by force. And if you don't agree with them, well, we're just going to keep them locked out in a way so they can't take part in anything, and everything's going to be kept confidential. Anyways, let's start at the bottom here. A lot of people have asked, okay, who is Frank Wilnor? Well, here you go. Welcome to Frank. Frank here is a writer for Railway Age. And here's the thing. He claims he's a former director of public relations for Smart TD. He's not. He was the PR director for the UTU. Okay. And he was essentially asked to leave, and now because of how that all went down, Smart stuck paying for his health care because he had a contract. But let's make something clear. This guy writes in favor all the time for the carriers. If the unions get a win, he's crying about how unfair it is and we set the railroad industry back. When the railroad gets a win, he turns around and looks at labor unions. Remember, he worked for a labor union as the public relations director over there with the UTU. And then basically calling us a bunch of overpaid crybabies. And that's something you need to keep in mind, because now the socialists are using Frank Wilnor in their publications, claiming he was a former top smart TD official. Let's make something clear. This guy's never come from the craft. Ever. All right. He's essentially a glorified foamer. I don't even want to call him a rail fan because that's just an insult to rail fans. This guy's a glorified foamer that has worked for STB and has all these degrees, and he's a journalist. He's a glorified foamer, guys. He doesn't actually come from the craft. He does not know what it's like to actually work out here, but he feels entitled and educated enough to look at all of us and tell us we just need to do as we're told and do what the company, just take what the company gives us. That's this guy. That's this guy. And this guy misses zero opportunities to try to drive a wedge between membership across all rail unions. Why? Because it works in the carrier's favor. This guy is very much pro-carrier. He's a smart guy, but he's very, very much pro-carrier and will not miss a single opportunity to throw mud in the face of rail labor in the rail unions. So I need you to keep that in mind. All right, let's move on to this article right here, because this is, remember, Ferguson hasn't actually put out what has happened yet. And so here on September 21st, okay, Frank starts circulating this, and it hits the membership like crazy. Nobody's happy with the TA. They're trying to pitch it as like, okay, the unions are going to try to sell this, but what if we vote no? Well, he starts getting this in people's minds, that if rail labor unions and class ones fail to ratify the tentative agreement by union members in the coming weeks, leadership of those unions may override the majority no vote and unilaterally impose a tentative agreement, or alternatively submit it to binding arbitration rather than pursue further collective bargaining or authorize a strike. Let's get something clear. What he's talking about here in 1996 is, yes, it happened, but it didn't actually play out the way he's wanting people to talk about. Okay. Now, through the Railway Labor Act, we are at the end of that right now. Okay. If we turn this down, all right, yes, we may have the option to strike, but Congress is not going to let us do that in any shape or form at any point. And yes, it's because of the Constitution. And that is where Congress is just straight up flexing their muscles and their power regarding that. It's in the Constitution. And the socialists like to say, they gave Jeremy a big old history lesson on American independence and the Constitution, which is funny because what they're doing is anti-American and actually trying to hijack American industry and labor to use against America itself on the international level, which to me, just from my take on it, seems more like, terrorism than it does, fighting for justice and better work-life balance and deserved benefits for American labor, because they straight up, this Will Lehman guy straight up has said, made in America basically needs to end. Like, don't take pride in made in America. Don't take pride in this. Everything needs to be international with these socialist organizations at the helm. And, it's really smoke and mirrors with these guys. And so after Jeremy's letter, they try to give Jeremy a history lesson on American independence, which I find insanely amusing, that these socialists that are trying to disrupt and hijack American economy and labor are trying to give a very pro-American, U.S. military veteran an education on American independence, rights, and freedom. I mean, I've gotten a really good laugh over that. So, like I said, Frank Wilner here is trying to make it look like, well, now union leadership is going to just turn around and force us into arbitration. And he's talking about how it's a bad thing and all this. Well, they contradict themselves here, because this gentleman right here, John Brennan, refers to Frank Wilner as spilling the beans on arbitration, and he's wanting to seem like he's got this super inside scoop, and that they keep playing this whole thing about a single 20-hour bargaining session. Guys, they were bargaining for hours. It wasn't just one 20-hour session like these guys would like you to believe. And I hope when I get to talk to Jeremy Ferguson that he can put an end to this rumor right here, because this is ridiculous. And so Wilner starts planting in everybody's heads that he may have exposed a secret agreement between labor and management to go to binding arbitration to avoid a work stoppage. Now, Congress can kick this to binding arbitration, or they can just put their stamp on the PEB. They can rewrite the PEB if they want. I mean, they could literally come back and say, okay, we're taking out two-person crew protections from going to arbitration, and we're reducing the gross wage increase, which that kind of scares me a little bit, because after midterms, who all here could be bought out by the carriers after midterms? That scares me. That scares me because they already, Burr kind of let a little something slip when he gave his resolution speech. He said he could guarantee 48 votes to pass a resolution while we were in negotiations. And if it wasn't for Bernie Sanders coming in there and, blocking that resolution, those guys would have passed that resolution. And right then and there, negotiations done. It's law. We're screwed. So, Bernie, thanks for your efforts and thanks for standing up for all of us. But he goes on, back on topic here, he goes on to talk about something here. And he's talking about a leak. He's going back and forth. Like, if you just read this, it's so full of contradictions that it's not a leak. What it really is Frank Wilner speculating and trying to make himself look like he's got the inside source when the guy really doesn't have shit. This guy's trying to cause division, and that's what his whole deal is cause division in the membership and turn around and make the carriers look like the good guys. That's his whole purpose in life. Okay. But he goes on to talk about binding arbitration, whether agreed to by carriers and labor or mandated by Congress, which is this could go to binding arbitration at the order of Congress. Okay. Not some backdoor deal. All right. But he does say that binding arbitration could play out in favor of labor. But again, we run into the same thing where we are putting our fate in the hands of an individual or individuals to decide our fate. That's what happened at PEB 250, and it really didn't go the way we wanted, expected, or hoped it would. Okay, I don't think anybody realistically expected to get 40% gross wage increase, but something near and around 30% was fair and expected and hoped for, and we got the 24% compounded. So yeah, that's a letdown. And then we got the ABS system, things like that. PEB did not go in our favor, and because the carrier refused to negotiate on a brand new contract, which would have required both sides agreeing to an extended cooling off period and sitting down together and drawing up a contract, not mediation, not arbitration. Sure, the NMB could have been called in to help facilitate that. But the carriers refused to sit down and draw up something new that benefited everybody. They refused to, because why? They didn't get one-person crews. And, they weren't getting what they wanted. So they refused to do anything. And so, as Jeremy said in his letter, he was faced with a choice. Either have Congress force it down our throats because they made it clear they weren't going to let anybody strike, or get what they could and leave it in the hands of the membership. Guys, if you're thinking logical and factual here, that's a smart play to see what you can get, and you got something rather than nothing. All right. Plain and simple, principle doesn't get us benefits. I've heard people say, well, we should have struck out of principle. Guys, we weren't going to get to strike, period. The end. It is obvious proof in public that Congress made it clear no matter what, we weren't going to get to strike. They weren't going to allow it to happen in any sort of situation on both sides of the party aisle. And so Wilner's saying here that, somebody spilled the beans. But I find this funny because he's actually saying it's not the unions, it's not the carriers that would have tried to benefit and, avoid binding arbitration. It is this right here. One group has everything to gain from killing binding arbitration and fomenting a prolonged strike. They are outsiders trying to whip up a revolution. So, guys, what that means is proletariat is typically used when you're referring to socialist. And the proletariat is a working class in the socialist society where that class has no economic value except their labor. That's what these guys think of you. That's what the socialists think of you. And if you think I'm crazy and I'm just talking out my ass, go look up the socialist economic hierarchy. Okay. Labor does not hold the glorious, statute that they want everybody to think. How they're referring to us in labor is that we're below middle class, we're below low class. The only thing we serve to the socialist society is labor. That's the only thing of value we have. And that's how they look at us. And so again, Jeremy put out that letter, and now they're confused. They're confused because Ferguson didn't try to sell the letter. He didn't try to sell the whole tentative agreement. He left it in the people's hands, the members' hands. And now they're scratching their heads saying that people find it odd. Well, I'm wondering why you guys find it odd. Is it because he didn't play into y'all's simple-minded predictions that's good for media and causing division? Or is he being a real representative of his members, giving them the facts, giving them the real what has happened, giving them real information, and letting us exercise our God-given right, duty, and power as union members to vote and decide our own fates? Quite frankly, he's doing what I think a union president should do. In this day and age, give us the facts, give me the information, let me know what happened, and let me make my decision based on what is good for me and mine and my union. And even if I vote one way and the majority goes the other, I'm still going to back my brothers and sisters right there on that line or in the agreement, whatever the majority votes. But when it comes to my vote, that's a personal decision, and he's letting me do that. And for that, I think that's one of the biggest class acts a representative of me as labor can do. And so it's just thrown them for a loop, as you can see in this article. And I'll leave these articles down in the description below. They really think that, Ferguson should have been trying to sell this. Why should he have to sell it, is my question. His job's not to sell it. His job is to get us benefits and then let us decide if those benefits and those terms are acceptable. Okay. His job as president is not, hey, to make sure, that everything that comes down is 100% acceptable. He's to get what he can for us and let us decide if it's acceptable or not. And that's what he did. All right. So we've already shown where old Frank here has gone back and forth, and he's just baffled. And this guy really seems to think pretty highly of himself, considering that he's not really been from the craft, and it's obvious he's. I wouldn't be surprised to find out he's getting some kind of payment from the carriers to write these pieces to bash labor and try to cause division. I wouldn't even be surprised if he's actually over here working with these socialists. But here's what really gets me. Now, guys, keep in mind that not that long ago, Frank and the magazine as a whole had put out articles before PEB talking about how the rank and file just need to fall in line and do as they're told. And that people were worried that labor weren't going to follow and be well heeled at the, national union leadership's, directions and orders. And that we should just fall in line and do as we're told. Now, this guy right here, the editor, what's his name? William Van Tuono. I probably screwed that up. I'm good at screwing up names. And here he chimes in saying that he's just as puzzled as Frank that his team negotiated in good faith and reached compromise. He's absolutely correct. That's why it's called negotiating. Jeremy went in there and tried to get what he could, considering the carriers bargaining coalition just refused to come off anything. And you always know somebody's about to blow smoke up your ass when they say, with all due respect to him as a railroader and veteran, he does not fully understand why he would say the things to his members that, in my opinion, are poisoning the well. Let's get something straight here, Bill. The poisoning of the well is coming from people like you and Frank. You guys have gone out of your way to poison labor and pit labor against the membership, or the membership against the unions. You work night and day on doing that. And now you don't get to come in here and act confused and baffled when somebody is being a real representative of their members in the face of all kinds of insane criticism, false narratives, and just absolutely non-factual publications that Frank and this magazine have constantly put out to no end. And now you don't get to come back here and be baffled and then try to bait everybody because he didn't do things the way you predicted he was. And now all of your narratives have been negated by facts and his actions. And now you want to try to act and question things and speak on our behalf. No, you can go take a short walk off a long cliff as far as I give a shit, because he came in and represented the people. He got what he could. Even though we all know that it's not nearly good enough because the carriers refused to actually negotiate in good faith. The exact same carriers that you guys protect and do fluff pieces for to put down labor, make us look like a bunch of wine bags in the media. And as far as I know, the vast majority of you guys never even turned a break. So you guys don't get to come here and go, oh, wait. And then you want to speak as if you're a railroader right here, saying, I know the contempt, when Jeremy says, I know the contempt that the carriers treat you with at work, you say you'd be a bit insulted. So a national leader of our union acknowledges the words and the hardships of his members, and you're going to be insulted? Who the hell do you think we are? For one, you don't speak for me. You're not in my situation. And you want to claim that you'd be a bit insulted? Get over yourself. All of you need to, because you're full of shit, is what it comes down to. And then I love how you plug this in here, because carriers would like us to vote yes on this. Oh, really? I can think for myself. You know what? I vote yes. Whereas you guys, old Frank just put out articles saying that we pretty much need to not think for ourselves and just do what our unions tell us to do. Sorry, buddy. It's not the 1800s, not the 1900s. We can think for ourselves, and we don't need you telling us how we need to think, which is exactly which you're accusing Ferguson of not doing. He's telling people to think for themselves, vote for themselves the way they feel is appropriate. You guys are a bunch of hypocrites. You don't speak for labor, and you obviously do not have labor in mind. Right here on speaker.gov, again, this link will be down below in the description. Pelosi, and I want you to note, September 15th, right here, press release. She talks on, the typical, hey, make us look good, but I want you to read this right here. With hope for an agreement, but concern for the challenges that a strike would present, Congress stood ready to take action. Congress, under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, has the authority and responsibility to ensure the uninterrupted operation of essential transportation services and has in the past enacted legislation for such purposes. Led by the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, the House prepared and had reviewed legislation so that we could be ready to act pursuant to Section 10 of the Railway Labor Act. Now, guys, keep in mind, Tom Holland, socialist, said Jeremy was making this up, that's not how the Constitution works, that they hadn't actually been ready to strike, that we were going to get to strike over the weekend, that there's no way they could stop us. This is proof. She just acknowledged on September 15th, guys, that they had already been working and reviewed legislation that they could have put a stop before we even had a chance to hold a picket sign. Right then and there. So, I like facts, not fiction. I don't do little horror stories. I don't make stuff up. It's right here, facts. And you can actually go look it up. The socialists want you to think that this is all made up, that Jeremy made this up and he's just passing the buck. Well, here you go. Here's the facts. Take it, leave it. I don't care, because I know there's some of you guys out there, it doesn't matter what I say or what I show you. You think somebody's over here trying to pull the wool over your eyes and that, there's no possible way that any of this could be what it is. And here it is. Front and center. It is what it is. Here's what it is. There's your facts, guys. Y'all have a good one. We'll catch you on the next one. Hit that like and subscribe button for me. Appreciate you guys.